What is good, 7th graders? We are looking at inequalities today and how to solve those. The nice thing is they are very similar to solving just a normal equation, except for a couple things that we'll talk about. Okay, so let's look at one example first. If I had, let's say, 4x plus 2 is less than 8. Just like we did with an equation, we're trying to get x by itself. So the first thing we're going to do is eliminate the term that does not have an x. Get rid of that. We do the opposite of what we see. We see plus 2, so we need to subtract 2. What you do to one side, you do to the other side. So I'll subtract 2. We get 4x is less than 6. And then our last step, 4 and x right next to each other, that's multiplication. We have to do the opposite of what we see again. Opposite of multiplying is dividing. We'll divide by 4. What we do to one side, we do to the other side. So we'll divide by 4 again. We get x is less than 6 over 4, which we can divide that to get a decimal, or we can reduce the fraction. 2 goes into 6 and 4, making it 3 over 2, which would be the same as 1.5. Either of those answers would work. Okay? Now, that's just like solving an equation. There's one exception when we are multiplying or dividing by a negative number. Okay, so let's look at an example that would do that. Let's say that we had 4x, let's just do negative 4x plus 2 is greater than or equal to 10. Okay, again, we want to get x by itself, so we have to get rid of the term without an x first, which is this 2. We see plus 2, we do the opposite of what we see, and we subtract 2. What we do to one side, we do to the other side. Subtract 2. We have negative 4x is greater than or equal to 8. And then negative 4 times x, the opposite of multiplying again is dividing, so we'll divide by negative 4, take the sign with it. What we do to one side, we have to do to the other side. So we divide by negative 4. Now what happens when we multiply or divide by a negative? We have to flip our inequality. So that's going to turn into x is less than or equal to 8 divided by negative 4 is negative 2. So it turns into x is less than or equal to negative 2. What happens when we divide by a negative number is we're actually flipping to the other side of the number line. So then we have to flip our inequality around to account for going to the other side of the number line as well. Let me show you what I mean. If we didn't flip the inequality sign, we would still have x is greater than or equal to negative 2. So if we try a number that is greater than or equal to negative 2 to see if it works in our original inequality, we could try 0, because 0 is greater than or equal to negative 2. If I plug in 0 back into the inequality, negative 4 times 0 is 0. 0 plus 2 is 2. But we know that 2 is not greater than or equal to 10. It's not true. But if I use a number less than or equal to negative 2, like maybe negative 4 times negative 4 is a positive 16. 16 plus 2 is 18. 18 is greater than or equal to 10. That makes it true. Okay, so when we divide or multiply by a negative number, we have to flip the inequality around in order to make the answers that we get true. We're essentially flipping from one side of the number line to the other side of the number line. Right, when we graph our solutions to inequalities, we're either going to have an open circle or we're going to have a closed circle when we graph. In our answer, if we have the signs greater than or less than, we're going to have open circle. If we have greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, we're going to have closed circles. Okay? Remember, we read these left to right, just like we read a book. If we come to the open mouth first, think back to elementary school when you talked about, maybe you thought of it like an alligator eating numbers. If you go from left to right and you come to the open mouth first, that's called greater than. If you come to a closed mouth, that's called less than. Okay? So if it's just greater than or less than, it's an open circle. greater than or equal to, less than or equal to a closed circle. So if our answer was x is greater than 4, we draw our number line with 0. We figure out where 4 is. We would have an open circle, because it's just greater than, and we want all numbers that are greater than 4. So we would draw an arrow pointing to the right, because that's where numbers are bigger than 4. Okay, if we had x is less than or equal to 3, we would draw our number line again, find 3. This time we're going to put a closed circle on 3, because 3 can actually be part of the answer. 3 is less than or equal to 3, so we want to include that number here. Where numbers are less than or equal to 3 is to the left, so we draw an arrow to the left, and all of those are our solutions. So back to this one, 4 is not greater than 4, so it's an open circle, it's not included in the answer, but all numbers to the right are answers to this inequality. Over here, 3 is an answer, and all numbers to the left are also answers to this inequality. So in equation, you have one answer. Inequalities, you can have infinitely many answers. Okay? We have some key words to keep in mind, again, when we're writing our inequalities on the last link. And some of these we've seen before when we were writing equations, but they meant to add or subtract. Now when we're working with inequalities, it's going to mean greater than or less than. So we have to keep that in mind, that it might mean something different than we thought it meant before, according to the context. Okay? So if you see something that says more than, that's going to mean when it's an inequality, that's going to tell us that it needs to be greater. Okay? If we need more money, it's going to be greater than that. At least is going to imply that it needs to be greater than or equal to. If I need at least 10 oranges, I could have more, or I could just have 10, so it'd be greater than or equal to. Less than is going to be the less than sign. Okay? If I need less than 5 apples, then I could have 4 or fewer, but I couldn't have 5, so I can't be less than or equal to, just less than. Over would imply greater as well. Okay, I need over $100, then I couldn't have just $100, I would need $100 or more. Okay, so keep those in mind as you're writing your inequalities, because that's going to help you write it. But the biggest thing is we need to pay attention to the context of the problem as well to know which one of these we need to use. Right?